I always feel like when we talk about certain positions and the 40 time, that sometimes it matters and sometimes it doesn't. But I do feel like for cornerbacks, the 40 time matters just as much as any position out there. Perhaps even more so than wide receiver. Now, some teams might not worry about it. Some teams like bigger physical press type of corners. Some teams prefer their corners to be outstanding in zone and therefore value instincts, awareness, football intellect, tackling ability, understanding of the role and the scheme that they're in. But by and large, you'd like your corner to have good fluid hips, to be able to turn and run, to be able to adjust quickly to the change of direction of the wide receiver. And when they get beat, and no matter how great the corner is, every corner is going to get beat at some point in time initially. You want that corner to have the recovery speed to come back and get themselves back into the play to possibly make a play on the ball. So corners that run really fast at the combine every year typically really help themselves. And I think Denzel Ward was already going to be thought of as, worst case scenario, a mid-first round pick. Teams are going to look at him as a really good corner, one of the best corners in this draft. But then when you go to the combine and you run in the 4.3s, you help your draft stock tremendously. And that's what Denzel Ward has done. He's went from being a guy I thought would go somewhere between like 11 to 20 to now you're getting top 10 buzz and top 10 talk. And a couple of months ago, I couldn't have envisioned a lot of people putting Denzel Ward higher on their board than Minkah Fitzpatrick, but that seems what has happened. So it's fascinating, that dynamic. And while it doesn't entirely deserve to be owed solely on that combine performance, in particular that 40-yard dash, you can't lie and say it doesn't help, because it absolutely does. Now, when I'm talking about Denzel Ward, it's interesting because this is a player the Bears reportedly like a lot. So I've taken some stock in trying to pay attention to him and study him really, really closely, even more closely than I would others, because I want to know where he's at. Because it could be possible that I'm rooting for him in the future. It might not be, but it could be. Here's what I saw on film. I saw a guy that has athleticism for days. He plays up to that 40 speed that he ran at the combine. He's an explosive, quick-twitch athlete with the speed to be able to cover a large amount of ground in zone and be able to run with even the faster wide receivers in the National Football League. And just as importantly, he's got recovery speed to, if he gets beat by a step, he can eventually catch back up and get in position to make a play on the ball. So you absolutely love that. I also like that he's got really good instincts and feel for the position. Like, this is a guy that I would trust a lot in zone coverage. Frankly, I feel like right now he's much more advanced as a zone corner than he is as a man corner. And I love his ability to read quarterbacks. I love his ability to anticipate, recognize what's going on. That plays really, really well at the corner position. You like guys that are aware of what is going on at all times. Like I said, great in zone coverage. Personally, I felt like he was better in zone than he was in man. Plays pretty hard as well. Was a pretty dependable and durable player. Now, granted, he comes from Ohio State, where it wasn't like he got a ton of tick behind Marshawn Lattimore and Garyon Conley last year or the year before that, when you've got guys like Eli Apple there. But I feel like that also bodes well for him, because you look at a guy like Conley was a first-round pick. Apple was a first-round pick, no matter what we want to say about him. And Marshawn Lattimore came into the league and wrecked shit for the Saints as a rookie. He was the Defensive Rookie of the Year. He was a stud. I knew it. A lot of you knew it. And it was obvious. Denzel Ward comes from a program at Ohio State that is starting to produce some real high-level defensive back talent, specifically at the corner position. So there's a little bit of a trend there of positional success at the NFL for these guys coming from that program. So that most certainly helps him. I think his technique is okay. He could use a little bit of work, more than a little bit of work. But he's not that far behind the 8-ball where you would worry about him getting shredded and destroyed with his poor fundamentals as a rookie. I wouldn't worry about that at all. I look at him and I see some of what people are really excited about, but I've got major concerns, especially when we talk about taking a corner in the top 10. He's not a big guy. You're talking about 5'10", 183 pounds? That profiles much more as a nickel-dime slot corner than it does as an outside corner. How highly do you want to draft those guys? In man coverage, what really concerned me about him was he was willing to give up way too much room in kind of man and off-man situations. He would get himself out of position a lot and allowed catches that he just shouldn't have let happen. And I don't care what any analytics say about this was the rating when somebody threw at him, blah, blah, blah. When you look at when he was thrown at, when you look at when balls were completed, there were plenty of times you feel like with his quickness and speed, he should have been there to make plays on the ball, and he didn't. So he's got some concerns there. Also talking about a guy that's not that big. How well is he going to be able to hold up outside? Like, are you going to sit there and have a ton of confidence in Denzel Ward to go man-on-man against somebody like Julio Jones? And to be fair, how many corners in the league do you trust to go man-on-man with a guy like Julio or Mike Evans or somebody like that anyways? But there are going to be times where you're going to need him to do so, especially if you're talking about taking him with the top 10 pick, and he's given up 5, 6, 7 inches and 20, 30, 40 damn pounds, and I don't quite see in his game right now where he plays bigger than what he is. At times when you watch Denzel Ward on film, he looks like he's 5'8". He plays like he's 5'8", 170 pounds. He doesn't play bigger than what he is. So it really concerns me in situations where he's going to be expected to press and be physical, if he's not going to get ragdolled. I'm also going to be concerned about when you throw downfield, the back shoulder fades, the jump balls, those 50-50 type of throws, whether or not he's actually going to be able to get into position, or he could get into trouble with some pass interference penalties, or he's just going to have guys power through him and go over the top of him. And I look at the Simi Cobbs tape from Indiana as an example of there were moments where Denzel Ward just got manhandled. It wasn't just him in that game, but there were plays where it was him, and he didn't look very good. So that to me is a real caution. It's not just solely about the size. It's to me the fact that he not only doesn't play bigger than his size, at times he plays smaller than his size. Like, he puts forth good effort in run support, but he doesn't pack a ton of wallop. He's not a very strong player, so he's going to have guys run through tackles. And how much is he really going to be able to defend the run in the NFL at 5'10", 183 pounds when he oftentimes plays smaller than he does bigger? I feel like it's a fair question. And to me, it really comes down to this with Denzel Ward. What type of corner do you think he could be? Like, I put an NFL comparison on him of Joe Haden. I don't think it's a perfect comparison because obviously Denzel Ward is faster than a Joe Haden, but I do think there's similarities in terms of the size profile, even though, like I said, Haden was a little bit bigger. But Haden was an athletic guy who ran in the 4.5s at the combine, and later on in the pro days, I think ran in the low 4.4s. There are similarities there, and Haden was able to stick outside for a few years and played at a decently high level. But you'd rather not stick somebody that size on the outside. Do you think he can hang outside? And if you do think he can hang outside, does he truly have the upside of a shutdown type of number one cover corner? If he does, then he's a top 10 pick all day long, damn the size. If he doesn't, then you should have no business drafting him in the top 10. Or do you envision him being primarily a slot corner? Do you think he's a guy that's best utilized in the slot, in open space, where he doesn't have to be as physical? He can rely more on speed and quickness. That seems to me the more natural fit for him. And if that is the more natural fit for him, how highly do you really value that? Because when you look at the fundamental way football's always been done in the NFL, those slot corners, those are usually day 2, day 3 type of picks that are maybe lacking great speed, but they've got enough quickness or they could do other things. Do you really want to take that type of guy in the top 10? That said, though, a lot of teams now put their best receivers a lot of times in the slot or primarily in the slot. Like, I look at the Steelers with Antonio Brown. It's just as valuable to have somebody that could defend him in the slot as it is to have somebody like a Jalen Ramsey that could defend him outside. Because they'll flip Antonio Brown all over the place, and other receivers are like this, and Odell Beckham Jr. is another guy I think about. You know, here's a guy that you line up and deploy all over the place. It doesn't matter that much. So you want a corner that can naturally have the physical profile that translates there. And I feel like that's where he better translates. My thought is, with Denzel Ward, is that he's just a tad bit overrated. A tad. Not a ton. But I don't look at him and get the same visions I got out of Marshawn Lattimore last year. I think Ward is a very good prospect. I do not think he is a great prospect. I know my raw grade has him in the second round range, but that really is penalizing him for speed and so forth. And it, again, is not a true reflection of where I ultimately will put him. I do think he's a top 20 player in this draft. I will ultimately have a first round grade on him. If the Bears take him at 8, I don't know, honestly, how happy I would be, especially depending upon who would still be there on the board. If a team traded back a little bit for him, then I don't have quite as much of an objection. But I do wonder if he's going to just be
primarily a high-end slot corner. I see the opportunity for him to be an outside corner, but I'm not quite as sold on him, and that's why he's not my number one corner in this draft.